You know that feeling when you see a drawing that's so realistic it just blows your mind, and you think, wow, I could never do that. I just wasn't born with that kind of talent. Well, what if I told you that's all wrong? What if drawing isn't some kind of magical gift, but a skill that absolutely anyone can learn? Today, we're going to dig into how the real secret to drawing has less to do with your hands and everything, and I mean everything, to do with learning how to truly see.
So let me ask you a question. Do you trust your eyes? I mean, of course you do, right? They're your window to the world. But what if that window isn't as clear as you think? What if it's actually more like a filter, one that's constantly simplifying, editing, and sometimes just getting things plain wrong before you're even aware of it?
And that, right there, is the crucial point, according to the amazing art educator Betty Edwards. Our brains are built to make shortcuts. We don't actually see raw data coming from our eyes. We see our brain's interpretation of that data. And this one thing is the single biggest roadblock for anyone who wants to learn to draw.
All right, so let's unpack this a little bit. How are our own brains playing tricks on us? This is what we can call the illusion of seeing.
See, your brain has to handle this constant flood of visual information, so it creates these mental shortcuts, these little symbols for everything. It doesn't actually process every single leaf on a tree. It just registers the idea of tree. It knows a table is supposed to be a rectangle, so it tells you you're seeing a rectangle, even when the angle you're looking from makes it a trapezoid. This is fantastic for getting through the day efficiently, but it's absolutely terrible for drawing accurately.
And this is exactly why so many of us throw our hands up and say, I just can't draw. When we try to draw that table, our brain is shouting, draw a rectangle, not the slanted, weird shape our eyes are actually seeing. The drawing looks wrong and we get frustrated, but we don't blame our perception, we blame ourselves. We think we're not creative or we just don't have the talent. But it's not a talent problem, it's a seeing problem.
But here's the good news, and it's really good news. If it's a seeing problem, that means there's a solution. Drawing isn't magic. It's a skill you can train.
I mean, think about it. No one is born knowing how to read, right? We learn by breaking it down into little pieces: letters, sounds, words, sentences. Well, Betty Edwards argues that drawing is exactly the same. It's what she calls a global skill, one that's made up of smaller component skills that anyone can learn. Once you get those down, you can draw. It's that simple.
So the real secret, the key, is learning to quiet that loud, verbal part of your brain, the part that's always naming and categorizing things, the part that insists a table has to be a rectangle. You need to learn how to shift into a different mode of thinking, one that's purely visual, spatial, and totally nonverbal. This is what artists do, often without even realizing it. They switch over to what you might call the artist mode. You know that feeling of being completely in the zone, where time just seems to disappear? This quote captures that state perfectly. Artists get into this mindset where they feel totally absorbed, relaxed, but also incredibly alert. In that state, they're not thinking in words. They're just purely seeing shapes, lines, light, and the relationships between them.
Okay, so this all sounds great, but how do we actually do it? How do we train ourselves to make that shift and see like an artist? Well, it all comes down to mastering 5 fundamental skills of perception.
This image here shows exactly how these skills work together. They build on each other, one on top of the next. You start with the most basic element, which is seeing edges, and then you move on to spaces, relationships, lights and shadows, and finally, the gestalt, or seeing the whole thing at once. Each skill is a layer that creates a complete framework for seeing the world as it actually is.
So let's quickly break these down. First up is the perception of edges. That's just seeing where one thing ends and another begins. Simple. Second, the perception of spaces, which is all about focusing on the empty areas around an object. Artists call this negative space, and it's a huge unlock. Third is the perception of relationships, which is just a fancy way of talking about proportion and perspective. Fourth, the perception of lights and shadows, which is what lets us see depth and form. And finally, the fifth skill, perceiving the whole, or the gestalt. This one's kind of the magic that happens automatically once you've really mastered the first 4.
So let's make that third skill, perceiving relationships, a bit more concrete. How do you do it? Well, artists use this really cool technique called sighting. It's basically a way of measuring what you see by comparing it to stuff you know is constant, like a perfect vertical or horizontal line. You can literally just hold up your pencil or your thumb to compare angles and measure how big one thing is compared to another.
And look at how this works in real life. Your brain knows the top of that table is a rectangle, and it's screaming that at you.
But from this angle, your eyes are telling you something completely different. By holding up a pencil, you can physically measure the true slanted angle of that edge. Sighting is like this little physical trick you can use to force your brain to accept what your eyes are seeing. It's basically a hack for seeing reality.
Okay, so you can probably see by now that this is about way more than just making pretty pictures. Learning these skills is like enrolling in a masterclass for your own perception.
I mean, think about it. We all agree that seeing is a critical human function, right? But it's a skill we're never formally taught. We learn to read, we learn to write, we learn math, but nobody ever teaches us how to see. Drawing can be that missing curriculum. It's a structured, proven way to improve one of our most fundamental abilities.
And we know how important this is on some intuitive level. Just think about how often we link the act of seeing with the act of understanding in the way we talk every single day.
When we finally have that aha moment and grasp a tough concept, what do we say? Ah, now I see it. When someone's missing the main point because they're stuck on the details, they can't see the forest for the trees. Understanding for us is fundamentally visual, so learning to draw literally trains you to get the picture more clearly in all areas of life.
And the benefits just ripple out from there. Training your perception sharpens your creative problem-solving skills, it helps you notice details that other people miss, and it gives you better access to that quieter, more intuitive part of your mind. It's about becoming a better observer of, well, everything, not just the things you want to draw.
So where does this journey ultimately lead? What's the real payoff? Well, it leads to a pretty profound shift in how you experience your day-to-day life.
This quote, this is what it's all about. It's not about the framed drawing you hang on the wall. It's about the change that happens inside you. People who learn this method consistently say the same thing. The world literally becomes more beautiful and more interesting to them.
The real goal here isn't a new hobby. It's a whole new way of being in the world. Learning to draw is a pathway to slowing down, to paying attention, and to discovering the incredible complexity and beauty in things you might have overlooked 1,000 times before. It's a tool for pure appreciation.
So I'll leave you with this to think about. If our brains are constantly filtering reality, constantly simplifying what's in front of us just for the sake of efficiency, then what are we all missing? What intricate details, what subtle shadows, what beautiful relationships are right in front of you, just waiting to be truly seen?